Welcome back to another story on Echo Story. Before we begin, tell us where in the world are you watching from? Now let's dive into today's story. The grocery bag slipped from my grasp before I could even register what I was seeing. A jar of marinara sauce crashed onto my newly tiled floor, splattering red across the white surface like a crime scene. For a few seconds, I stood motionless in the doorway, my keys still in hand. My mother and sister were inside my cottage. The same cottage I had only shown them pictures of 3 days earlier. The cottage whose address I had intentionally kept to myself. "What are you doing here?" My voice sounded faint, almost detached. Liana spun around, a measuring tape stretched between her hands as she assessed the guest bedroom I used as my home, office. Her startled look quickly turned into an annoyingly smug expression. "Posey, you're back earlier than expected," she said. Mom straightened up from rearranging my sofa and armchair into a layout I despised. "We thought you'd be at work until 5, she replied, ignoring my question. I stepped over the spreading pool of sauce, my shoes sticking slightly to the floor. "How did you get in?" I demanded. Mom waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, I had a spare key made yesterday when I stopped by to congratulate you," she said casually. The memory flashed back instantly, Mom asking to use the bathroom during her brief visit, her purse left behind as she walked down the hall. At the time, I hadn't thought anything of it. "You took my keys and made copies without asking?" My voice trembled with disbelief. "Don't be so dramatic, honey," Mom said, busying herself by fluffing a throw pillow. "We're just figuring out how to make this work for everyone." Make what work? The question formed in my mind but didn't leave my lips because suddenly I understood. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Fragments of my childhood rushed back, Liana's 11th birthday with a hired clown and a backyard carnival, while my own celebration that year had been a store-bought cake in the living room. Mom had dismissed my hopes with, "It's just not in the budget for you." Meanwhile, Liana's wishes were always met with lavish spending. The pattern had never changed. When I announced I was house hunting last month, Mom hadn't congratulated me. Instead, she had called Liana immediately to discuss opportunities. "This is my home," I said, each word sharp and cold. "Not yours, not ours." "Mine," I corrected, crossing the room to take the spare key from Liana's hand, where she had been fidgeting with it. Her fingers tightened for a moment before letting go. "You can't seriously want to live here alone," she said, her brow furrowing with fake concern. "This place has 3 bedrooms. The kids need space." "Your housing situation isn't my problem," I replied, surprised by the firmness in my voice. "After everything we've done for you?" Mom's eyes widened, her hand pressing dramatically to her chest. "Your sister's children need bedrooms. Family helps family, Posey. You know that." The familiar weight of obligation pressed down on me. A lifetime of expectations that I would sacrifice for Liana, just as I always had. But something inside me had shifted. The trembling in my hands stopped as clarity washed over me. "You have exactly 2 minutes to leave before I call the police," I said, pointing toward the door, my arm steady. "You wouldn't dare," Mom snapped. 1 minute, 50 seconds, I replied. They left, with Mom slamming the door hard enough to shake the windows. I slid the deadbolt into place with a satisfying click. 20 minutes later, as I was still scrubbing marinara from the grout, the phone rang. Dad's name appeared on the screen. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he barked the moment I answered. "Your mother is in tears. You're tearing this family apart with your selfishness." I stayed silent, scrubbing harder at a stubborn red stain. "Liana needs help, Posey. That's what family does." "You've always understood that before," he shouted. "Always understood. Always accommodated. Always sacrificed." "Not anymore," I whispered. But he was still yelling. Not hearing me, after I hung up, I stared at the family photo on the mantel. Mom, Dad, Liana with her perfect husband and 3 children, and me, slightly off-center, wearing the strained smile I'd worn my whole life. For the first time I saw us clearly. I saw the pattern of sacrifice I had been conditioned to accept. I turned the frame face down on the shelf. This house was mine. This life was mine. And I was done giving pieces of it away. A day later, a Facebook notification chimed while I sipped my morning coffee, a rare moment of peace 3 days after the marinara incident. Liana had tagged me in something, expecting another passive-aggressive family photo where I was awkwardly positioned at the edge. I tapped the icon. What I saw made my breath catch. A post from 3 weeks ago, before I had even closed on the cottage, showed Liana's 3 children squeezed into their shared bedroom. The caption read, "Kids are finally getting a bigger place soon. Blessed. Family first." My thumb hovered over the screen as I scrolled to the comments. "Which bedroom does Ellie get?" one of Liana's friends asked. Liana's reply, "The blue one with the bay window. Jack and Tyler will share the room across the hall. Mom thinks the 3rd bedroom should stay a guest room in case Aunt Carol visits." My coffee mug slipped from my fingers, splashing hot liquid over my bare feet. I barely felt the burn. 3 weeks ago. They had been planning this 3 weeks ago, before I had even signed the mortgage papers. I rushed to the bathroom, my stomach heaving as the magnitude of their betrayal hit me. This hadn't been an impulsive idea after seeing my house. It had been calculated, planned. They had been strategizing how to take over my home before I had even bought it. My phone buzzed with a text as I rinsed my mouth. It was from Dad, but he had accidentally included me in a group message meant for Mom and Liana. "Don't worry about Posey's tantrum," Mom had written. "She'll give in once you're settled. She always does." The shaking started in my hands and spread until my whole body trembled against the cool bathroom tile. She always does. 3 words that summed up my entire life. The family dinner invitation arrived by text the next evening. "We need to talk about a solution," Dad wrote. "Your mother's making pot roast. 7 p.m. I should have refused. Every instinct screamed to stay away, but a small, hopeful part of me wondered if maybe, just maybe, they had reconsidered. When I arrived, the table was already set with Mom's good china. Dad, Mom, and Liana sat clustered on one side, with an empty chair waiting for me on the other. The division couldn't have been clearer if they had drawn a line down the middle. "Posey, we're so glad you could join us," Mom said, her smile tight. Before I could respond, Dad slid a manila folder across the table. "We've found the perfect solution." Inside were printouts of 5-bedroom houses, all within 2 miles of Liana's children's school. Each listing had notes like perfect playroom and good backyard for the kids. "These are lovely," I said carefully. "For Liana and Mark." Dad cleared his throat. "For all of you, together." "We've already talked to your bank," Mom added, stirring her iced tea. "Transferring your mortgage to a different property is quite simple. The difference in price would be manageable if everyone contributes." My mouth went dry. "You contacted my bank?" "Just preliminary discussions," Mom said, waving away my concern like it was nothing. "Your furniture won't all fit, of course," Liana chimed in. "But we could sell the extra pieces. We'll need space for the kids' bunk beds." The front door opened, and Mark strolled in, late as usual. He nodded at me before turning to Dad. "I was thinking about the garage spaces. The left side would work better for my truck if Posey doesn't mind parking on the street." The casual way they were dividing my property, a home they had never contributed a penny toward, left me speechless. My hands curled into fists beneath the table. "Posey," Dad said, his voice dropping into the serious tone he used when I was a child and had disappointed him. "Refusing to help would show you don't really care about being part of this family." Mom reached across the table, not quite touching my hand. "Think about your relationship with your nieces and nephew. Children remember who was there for them. Everyone knows family comes first in this town," Liana added, her eyes narrowing. "What would people think if they knew you had all that space while your sister's children are crammed into one room?" The weight of their expectations pressed against my chest. For years, my identity in this family had been Liana's supportive sister, never just Posey, with my own dreams and needs. "I spoke with Robert at your office," Dad mentioned casually, as if he hadn't just crossed another boundary. "He understands your family crisis might require some flexibility in your schedule to help Liana with the move." "After all we've done," Mom added, her voice trembling with practiced emotion, "providing a home for you all those years." Tut. Memory surfaced of writing rent checks every month throughout college while living in their basement, watching them pay Liana's full tuition and apartment costs without question. The silence stretched as they waited for me to give in. The familiar script: Posey protests, family pressures, Posey surrenders. She always does. But something had changed inside me since finding them in my house. The pattern was suddenly visible, like one of those magic eye pictures that snaps into focus after years of seeing only random dots. I stood, carefully placing my napkin beside my untouched plate. "Watch me not help," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I walked out, ignoring their calls to return, their demands to sit back down and be reasonable. In my car, my phone buzzed with texts and calls. I switched it to silent. As I drove home that night, my phone lighting up with angry messages, I wondered if standing my ground was worth potentially losing my family. Should I maintain this boundary at all costs, or find some compromise that wouldn't completely sacrifice my independence? The house was mine, but was complete separation the only way to protect it? The thought of compromise flickered and died as I remembered the Facebook post. They had never intended to ask. They had planned to take. Some boundaries couldn't be partial. Sometimes the only protection was a wall. 3 days after the dinner ambush, notifications pinged my phone like tiny explosions, each one jolting me from whatever momentary peace I had found. I made the mistake of looking at Liana's latest Facebook post, her children squeezed onto a pull-out sofa, their faces arranged in exaggerated pouts. The caption read, "When family abandonment means your kids don't have proper bedrooms. Family first. Unless you're selfish, apparently." My stomach twisted as I scrolled through the sympathetic comments. People I had known since childhood offered prayers and support. 3 different church ladies promised to speak to me about Christian family values. My finger hovered over the reply button, but what could I say that wouldn't make things worse? My phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Hatcher, my 3rd-grade teacher. "Your mother showed me pictures of your beautiful home. So much space for just one person. I raised 4 children in half that size." I set the phone face down on the kitchen counter and gripped the edge until my knuckles turned white. The betrayal burned like acid in my throat. Not just from Liana, whom I had come to expect this from, but from Mom. She had posted photos of my house online with captions about forgetting where you came from and what happens when success goes to your head. The doorbell rang, sending my heart racing. Through the peephole, I saw Pastor Williams on my front step, Bible tucked under his arm. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a coordinated attack. "I'm sorry, I'm not available for visitors today," I called through the door. "Posey Adams, I've known you since you were in Sunday school. Your family is concerned, and as your spiritual advisor—" "I didn't request spiritual advice," I interrupted, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "Please respect my privacy." His sigh carried through the door. "I'll be praying for your heart to soften." After he left, I sat at my kitchen table and made a list of everything that had happened in the week since I had thrown my family out of my house. The scale of their retaliation was becoming clearer and more terrifying. Yesterday, I had discovered the first concrete evidence of how far they were willing to go. My mortgage statement hadn't arrived, so I called the bank. "We've been sending it to your updated address," the representative explained. "Your parents contacted us about forwarding your financial documents to their home for safekeeping." The violation left me breathless. They had nearly succeeded. If I hadn't been vigilant about my payments, What else had they diverted? What other pieces of my life were they quietly taking over? Sleep had become almost impossible. I lay awake, cataloging potential vulnerabilities, jumping at every creak and rustle outside my windows. The thought of checking my mail each day filled me with dread. What new boundary would they cross? What fresh guilt trip would be waiting? This morning, I received an email from my homeowners association. My parents had contacted them with concerns about commercial activity at my address. A complete fabrication, but one that required me to respond with formal documentation proving I worked from home occasionally, but didn't run a business. The cost of this estrangement kept mounting, but the alternative, a lifetime of exploitation, of being seen as nothing more than Liana's support system, seemed unbearable now that I had glimpsed freedom. I started small, changing passwords, setting up mail forwarding directly to my workplace, installing security cameras at every entrance. I documented each unwanted contact, each social media post, each attempt to access my personal information. The methodical process steadied my shaking hands. When the security company finished installing my new system, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. My home, the place that was supposed to represent my independence, now resembled a fortress. The next morning, a small miracle appeared on my desk at work. A loaf of homemade bread wrapped in brown paper, with a note tucked beneath the twine. Sorry I blabbed about your new place. Not everyone thinks you're wrong. Some of us wish we'd been brave enough to set boundaries years ago. Marcy's gesture brought tears to my eyes. I hadn't realized how isolated I had been feeling until that moment of support. The peace was short-lived. That evening, I pulled into my driveway to find Liana's SUV parked in front. Through my window, I could see shadows moving inside my house. The familiar surge of violation was accompanied by something new, a cold, crystalline anger. This time I didn't hesitate. I called the police from my car, watching as neighbors peeked from behind curtains at the drama unfolding. By the time the officer arrived, my family had noticed me sitting in the driveway. They spilled onto the front porch, Mom's face twisted with self-righteous indignation, Dad's red with anger, Liana clutching her purse like a shield. "She's throwing her own family onto the street," Liana cried dramatically as the officer approached. "We were just visiting," Mom insisted. "With what key?" I asked calmly, showing the officer my security camera footage on my phone. "I didn't give you permission to enter my home." Mom stepped forward, her eyes darting toward the gathering neighbors. "How could you call the police on your own blood? What will people think?" Something shifted inside me. The question that had controlled my entire life, what will people think, suddenly seemed absurdly irrelevant. "I don't care what they think," I said, my voice steady. "I care what I think, and I think this ends today." The officer escorted them from my property with a warning about trespassing. As they drove away, I realized something profound. I had spent my whole life afraid of disappointing my family, measuring my worth by their approval. But I had never considered how consistently they had disappointed me, how little they had valued my independence, my choices, my right to a life that wasn't defined by what I could give them. The next day, Dave, a friend from college who now practiced family law, helped me draft a formal cease and desist letter. "They're counting on your guilt," he told me as we reviewed the document. "They've weaponized it your whole life." When Liana showed up at my workplace the following week, her eyes swollen from theatrical crying, my co-workers formed an unexpected protective barrier. Marcy intercepted her at the front desk. 2 others joined me for lunch when Liana tried to ambush me in the parking lot. The contrast was stark. These people, who owed me nothing, respected my boundaries without question, while my family, who should have protected me, trampled every line I drew. With each day, my voice grew stronger. No became easier to say. This doesn't work for me rolled off my tongue without apology. The words "I've made my decision" no longer felt like a betrayal. At home, I changed all the locks, upgraded my security system with door cameras that sent alerts to my phone. I gathered financial records, text messages, social media posts, a paper trail documenting years of exploitation. The folder grew thick with evidence I hoped never to need but felt safer having. The notification appeared on my phone while I was in a meeting 2 days later. The doorbell camera showed my mother on my front step, trying a key in my lock while glancing nervously over her shoulder. The key didn't work. I had changed the locks twice since the last confrontation. Her expression darkened as she tried again, then reached into her purse for what looked like another key. My heart pounded as I watched the footage. This isn't over. This is just beginning. I spent my Sunday afternoon assembling evidence like puzzle pieces on my dining room table. Every trespass, every manipulation, every lie, documented with military precision. The security camera footage plays on my laptop, showing Mom trying 3 different keys in my front door yesterday while I was at work, I told Dave, adding the timestamp to my spreadsheet. A curl of satisfaction replaced the usual guilt. This looks comprehensive, Dave said, adjusting his reading glasses as he reviewed my documentation. The cease and desist letter should be ready tomorrow. Will you be okay delivering it? Yourself? I need to do this myself, I replied, adding the mortgage company's call recording to a labeled folder. The representative's voice still echoed in my ears. We spoke with someone claiming to be your mother about transferring your mortgage to another property. We informed her this wasn't possible without your direct authorization. My therapist, Judith, had guided me. Document, don't engage. Facts, not emotions. Boundaries, not arguments. Monday morning, I placed the certified letter in my mother's hands. She didn't open it, just stared at me with wounded eyes, as if I had betrayed her by protecting myself. You'll regret this, she whispered, but took the envelope. 3 days passed in blessed silence. No calls, no texts, no unexpected visits. I slept through the night for the first time in weeks. Thursday brought the inevitable escalation. I was reviewing code at my desk when Marcy from accounting appeared at my cubicle, eyes wide. Your parents are in the lobby, she whispered. They told reception your sister was in an accident, and they needed you immediately. Cold dread washed over me, until I spotted the text from Liana complaining about her kids' school lunches, time-stamped 2 minutes ago. I found my parents, arguing with our receptionist, Mom dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue while Dad demanded I be brought out immediately. Family emergency, he barked at the young man behind the desk. I just texted with Liana, I said, stepping into view. She's fine. Mom dropped the tissue. Posey, thank goodness. We've been so worried. Miss Adams? My boss appeared beside me, her expression carefully neutral. Is everything all right? Dad attempted his charming smile. Family matter. We'll just borrow Posey for a bit. My family appears to be lying about a medical emergency to disrupt my workday, I told my boss, loud enough for the entire reception area to hear. I apologize for the disturbance. Security escorted them out while I returned to my desk, ignoring the stares. That evening, I discovered Liana's latest attack, a GoFundMe page titled Housing Crisis, Help My Children Have a Home, with my photo prominently featured. One email to the platform's legal department, citing unauthorized use of my image, and the campaign disappeared by morning. My father's voicemail that night slipped from rage into accidental truth. You, ungrateful. Little, do you know what you've done? We had it all planned out. We were going to move in whether you liked it or not. And now you've embarrassed your mother in front of... I saved the recording with a grim smile. When my company announced an opening at their new branch in Colorado Springs, I found myself weighing a promising opportunity against running away from conflict. Would moving mean letting them win? Or was it my chance for a fresh start beyond their reach? My support system rallied around me like a protective wall. Dave sent a formal warning to my family, outlining the legal consequences of continued harassment. Judith helped me craft responses that stayed firmly factual, without engaging their emotional bait. My boss offered flexible hours during what she called this transitional period, her eyes knowing but never pitying. "Your house needs better security," Tara, my realtor friend, said, walking the perimeter of my property. "Motion sensing. Lights here, and reinforce this back door." I had expected to feel alone in this fight. Instead, I had discovered allies I never realized I had, people who valued my boundaries and recognized my family's toxicity. The tide began to turn. Aunt Susan called to ask hesitantly about the other side of the story. Cousin Mike messaged that he didn't think it was right what they were asking. Even Liana's perfect social media campaign backfired when friends commented, "Why can't you and Mark support your own family?" And, "Isn't Posey single? Why should she house your kids?" Their facade was cracking, revealing the selfishness beneath. The job offer letter arrived in my email Friday afternoon. Colorado Springs branch manager glowed on my screen like a beacon. Something loosened in my chest. Possibility, perhaps. Or freedom. For the first time in weeks, I smiled without reservation. A week later at home, the cherry pie sat on my kitchen counter like a crimson trap. Mom stood beside it, fingers tapping against the granite in a rhythm I had known since childhood, the beat of her impatience when I wasn't immediately agreeing to her plans. She had rehearsed this. I could tell by the way she kept shifting her weight from one foot to the other, just as she had before parent-teacher conferences when I was young. "Your father and I have been thinking," she said, her voice unnaturally pleasant, "and we've come up with the perfect compromise." I wasn't aware we were negotiating, I thought, keeping my distance. The kitchen island between us felt like necessary protection. Mom pulled a folder from her oversized purse. "We found some lovely properties just 15 minutes from here. 5 bedrooms, plenty of space." She slid several glossy listings toward me. "You sell this cottage. We all move into one of these. There's even a mother-in-law suite for Liana's family." I flipped through the listings, noting the prices, triple what my cottage had cost. "And how exactly would this work financially?" "Well, you'd get the master bedroom, of course," she said, as if offering me a tremendous gift. "We've already toured 3 of them." The realtor was very accommodating when we explained the situation. "You toured houses in my name?" The calm in my voice surprised even me. Mom waved dismissively. "We needed to move quickly. The Henderson's daughter is also looking in that neighborhood." She leaned forward, her voice dropping. "Listen, Posey. If you're going to be difficult about this, we can always contest the ownership. You couldn't possibly have afforded this place without family help." Family help. The words tasted bitter. "You mean the full rent I paid while living at home during college? Or perhaps you're referring to the student loans I'm still paying off while Liana's education was fully funded?" Mom's face hardened. "Don't be ungrateful." I walked to my office without responding and returned with an envelope. I placed it on the counter between us, next to her untouched pie. "What's this?" She didn't reach for it. "It's a job offer from our company's new branch in Arizona," I said, pushing it toward her. "I accepted it last week." Her hand froze mid-tap. "Arizona? You're selling the cottage?" "I'm selling the cottage," I confirmed, "and moving to Tucson next month." The color drained from her face. "But what about Liana?" "Her housing situation is not my concern." I opened a drawer and pulled out a thick manila folder. "I've been gathering some interesting documentation." I spread the contents across my counter. Financial records showing my paid rent throughout college, alongside Liana's fully funded education. Birthday expenditure comparisons, showing the thousands spent on her celebrations versus the bare minimum for mine. Loan papers for the cars they had bought her while I saved for my used Honda. "What is this supposed to be?" Mom's voice lost its rehearsed quality. "Evidence." I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. "And here's my security footage showing 17 unauthorized entry attempts on my property." Mom stared at the screen, watching herself and Liana testing keys in my lock, peering through windows, even once bringing a locksmith who, thankfully, had refused the job. "I'm not running away," I said, gathering the papers. "I'm running towards something better, a life where I'm valued, not just useful." "Your father will be furious," she whispered. But there was a new uncertainty in her voice. "I'm counting on it." 3 days later, I arrived at my parents' house for what they had billed as a family meeting to resolve the housing situation. The driveway was full: my aunt's car, my cousin's SUV, even my grandmother's ancient Buick. The gangs, all here to witness my surrender, I thought. I took a deep breath before entering, folder tucked securely under my arm. The conversation in the living room halted when I stepped inside. Liana sat on the couch between my parents, a united front. The extended family was arranged in a loose semicircle, an audience for the performance. "There she is," Dad said, standing with a forced smile. "We were just about to explain our solution to everyone." "Actually," I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly silent room, "I have an announcement first." I placed my folder on the coffee table and opened it to reveal the listing for my cottage, complete with professional photographs and a bright red for sale banner across the top. "My house goes on the market Monday," I announced, "and I've accepted a position with my company's Arizona branch. I'm moving next month." The silence stretched for 3 heartbeats before Liana's shriek shattered it. "But what? About us? Where are we supposed to go?" I met her gaze steadily. "The same place you've been living, the same place you'd still be if you hadn't tried to take what's mine." Dad stood, his face reddening. "This is how you abandon your family? After everything we've done for you?" "Everything you've done." I pulled out copies of my documentation, passing them to my grandmother and aunt. "Here's a record of what you've actually done. Different rules for different daughters, different support, different expectations." My aunt's eyes widened as she scanned the papers. "You made her pay rent during college while paying for Liana's apartment?" "It built character," Dad snapped, but his confidence wavered as more family members began examining the evidence. "You should see the security footage," I added, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Them trying to break into my house while I'm at work, calling my mortgage company pretending to be me, creating a GoFundMe claiming I was in financial distress." Grandmother's hand covered her mouth. "Is this true?" My parents. Silence was answer enough. As I drove home that evening, my phone buzzed with texts, not from my parents or Liana, but from my aunt, my cousins, my grandmother. Words of support, questions about whether they'd been misled about other family matters over the years. The beginning of cracks in the family mythology. 2 days later, my realtor called with news that felt like both victory and farewell. "You've got an offer already," she said. "20,000 over asking, cash, with a 30-day close." "I'll take it," I told her without hesitation. "One more thing," she added. "Do you want to keep the spare keys or should I discard them?" I thought of all the keys that had been copied without my permission, all the boundaries crossed. "Discard them," I said. "I won't need them where I'm going." As I hung up, I heard whispers that my parents had already approached my cousin Thomas about his guest house. The cycle continued, but without me in it. I wondered briefly if any relationship with my family could be salvaged after I moved, whether distance might actually make healing possible. But that was a question for another day. Today, I had boxes to pack and a new life to build, one that was entirely my own. A year later, the morning sun streamed through windows I hadn't yet dressed with curtains because I hadn't decided what style I wanted. My furniture sat exactly where I had placed it, not where someone else thought it should go. The wall beside my desk bloomed with photographs, me atop a mountain in Colorado, shaking hands with the CEO after my promotion, standing proudly in front of this house on closing day. Not a single picture showed my family. My phone rested on the counter, its screen occasionally lighting up with notifications. A year ago, I would have lunged for it, heart racing at the possibility of another accusation or demand. Now, I glanced at it with casual indifference. Unknown numbers went straight to voicemail, and several familiar ones did too. Outside, through the kitchen window, my garden caught the morning light. Rows of basil, thyme, and rosemary, herbs Mom had always claimed would overwhelm her delicate palate, thrived in neat beds. Brilliant orange marigolds bordered the walkway, their pungent scent a childhood favorite. I had never been allowed to plant near the house. Too common, Mom had said when I was 10. We're putting in roses instead. I bit into a fresh strawberry from my own patch and smiled at the sweetness. The doorbell rang precisely at noon. Friends filed in, carrying gift bags and platters, their faces bright with genuine happiness to see me. No one had an agenda beyond celebration. "Happy birthday, Posey," Elaine, my colleague-turned-friend, called, setting down a bakery box. "Apple pie, as requested." "Not cake?" Thomas, another co-worker who had driven 2 hours to be here, asked. "I've always preferred pie," I answered, the simple truth filling me with unexpected satisfaction, especially apple. For decades, I had dutifully blown out candles on chocolate cake because Liana loved it. Mom had always said making 2 desserts was wasteful when we could share. Elaine arranged candles on the pie while I poured wine into glasses, stemware I had chosen because I liked it, not because it matched someone else's taste. "What should we toast to?" Sophia, the neighbor who had brought me homemade bread when I moved in, asked. "To building homes, not just houses," I said, raising my glass, "and to the family we choose." The words settled warmly in my chest as we clinked glasses. On the wall near my door hung a simple wooden key hook with just one key, mine. No spare hidden for emergencies, no copy held by anyone else. Later, after everyone left, I found myself thinking about Jared, the new engineer at work. Yesterday, I had spotted him shrinking into himself as our project manager dismissed his ideas. The familiar posture had hit me like a punch to the gut, the same way I used to make myself smaller around my family. "Actually," I had said, interrupting the manager, "Jared's approach could save us significant testing time. Let's hear more." The surprise and gratitude in his eyes had reminded me of my own reflection the day I finally stood up to my family. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael, the landscape architect I had been seeing for a month. He respected my boundaries with a reverence that once would have felt foreign but now felt right. "Still on for hiking Saturday?" the message read. I smiled as I typed back, "Absolutely." Before turning in, I scrolled through my phone gallery and paused at an old family photo. Everyone, grouped tightly together, me slightly out of frame as usual. After a moment's hesitation, I deleted it and replaced it with a picture of my front door, painted the bold red I had always wanted. My cousin Brenda texted occasionally now. Last week, my uncle had called to check in. These tentative connections with extended family happened on my terms, with clear boundaries they had learned to respect. As I settled into bed in my quiet house, I wondered whether complete separation from my parents and Liana was necessary for healing, or if someday I could rebuild limited contact on my terms. For tonight, I was content with the life I had built, one where every choice, from the garden herbs to the friends around my table, reflected who I truly was.